Good evening. So happy to see a full room tonight for this talk because she's a wonderful presenter and you're going to hate it when you're done. So Kim comes to us from New York. So her and her husband came here from New York to be with us tonight. She has a PhD in plant physiology and has taught biology classes and worked as a research scientist for Cornell University. I practiced out there, but really not enough. She also has taken numerous courses at Bennington College, and I imagine that has something to do with climate change and the sort of that, maybe. Kim is actively engaged in her community, serving on the Climate Smart Community Committee. She's an environmentalist, a parent, a grandparent. She's passionate about educating communities about climate change and the significant threats of plastic in our environment. She is pleased to have become part of the Beyond Plastics Volunteer Speaker Bureau, which is who she's representing tonight after doing all of her coursework. And in her private life, her and her husband like to hike, camp, canoe, and enjoy the outdoors, which makes sense as an environmentalist. And they recently purchased a small trailer, and they don't just go around the country having a good time on vacation. They go and do research and study climate change while they're out there doing that. So please join me in welcoming Kim Cameron.
Thank you very much, Dorothy, for that really nice introduction. And yeah, this is my first time to this area. So before we start, I have to say it is just gorgeous. I've been in Charlevoix for a slight period of time now. I am so just enamored by everything here. But we've also been over to Mackinac Island and spent a couple of days there. And that's just inspiring. We'll just put it that way. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to have a reason to come up here. I really appreciate it. So tonight, Dorothy's probably right. You like me now, you may not feel quite so happy by the time I finish our conversation, but hopefully I will be able to answer some of your questions along the way. Plastic pollution and the road to activism. So I got into this because, like everybody else, I thought we were using too much plastic. So what do we do about that? Well, I did what every scientist does, right? I started recycling and I started gathering all my pieces that I had recycled, and I wanted to weigh them and keep track of them. And I have a little record book of how many ounces I had per day and how much I was throwing in the garbage and how big it was. And I did that for about 3 months and I went, this is ridiculous. No matter what I do, I cannot reduce the amount that I have. And there's something wrong here. That led me to go to the internet, find out what was going on. That led me to Beyond Plastics, which is an organization that is nationwide. Has anyone heard of Beyond Plastics before? No, interesting. We're more in the Northeast than we are in the middle of the country. Maybe it's time for you all to think about having a Beyond Plastics affiliate group here in Charlevoix. But that led me there. That led me to take a number of courses. That also led me to wanting to be a speaker, an organized speaker for the organization. So that's kind of where we are today. But what really, really inspired me to get out there and want to do something about this were these guys, my grandchildren. It's not me, all right? I'm too old. What's going on right now in our environment is probably not going to affect me all that much at this point. But it is going to affect those guys. And I have a 5 and a 7-year-old now. This was taken a couple of years ago. But they're now 5 and 7. And now I've also added a 2-year-old to that. So our world is different now compared to what it was when I was born. So what you can see on that graph there is where I was born, there was no plastic, essentially. And yet, when my grandchildren were born, you can see we're on the exponential path of increase in plastic. And that's a problem because unfortunately, plastic impacts younger generations more than they do older generations, just because they're still growing, they're still becoming. So, what do we do about it? Well, for starters, if there's something I want you to take away from the talk today, it is that plastic is a hazardous substance. It is hazardous in two ways. It breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, microplastics and nanoplastics, and it has a whole bunch of chemicals associated with it. And these chemicals leach out into our environment. You know, this is kind of what we all think about of plastic, right? It's in the ocean. It's just there, you know, it's fallen down into the floor, the bed of the ocean, and we really don't see it. It's messy. It's just everywhere. We have a child who lives in Hawaii, and I tend to walk along the beaches in Hawaii, and I get pretty freaked out because there's plastic all over the place on those beaches. I'm okay for a couple of days, but after a while, I start to get slightly more depressed about the situation. But that's kind of what we think of with plastic. But the reality here in the United States is a little different. 42% of the current plastic produced is just for packaging. And it looks like this. It's in our grocery stores, right? It's nice little neat rows of plastic. And we think we're okay because we've just got this organized plastic. It's not that mess that we saw. But there's a real question here. Where is all that plastic going? Because it breaks down smaller and smaller little pieces, but it doesn't disappear. Where is it going? Well, if you look at this picture, you can see that some of it is going to the ocean, right? You can see that. That little arrow there is an indication of how much of it goes to the ocean. But look where the vast majority of that plastic goes. It goes to landfills. Now, here in Charlevoix, I did a little bit of research, and you all have a transfer station here. So the garbage goes to a transfer station, and then it gets transferred to a landfill. So just think about that. Most of your plastic is actually going to a landfill. And where, if you look at how much plastic we're making, how much of it is coming from residual plastics or recycled plastics? A minimal amount. The vast majority of our plastic is coming from new plastics. Even though you may hear about recycled plastics, the reality is it is a heck of a lot cheaper to use virgin, newly made plastic than it is to use recycled material to make plastic. And companies are out there to make money, and they make money by using the cheapest product, and that's virgin plastic. All right, but we are drowning in plastic. And this is just an image showing you the places where we have landfills. And the ones in red are the ones that are closed because they're full. And the ones in green are the ones that are still open. So we don't really see this stuff, but it is underneath us everywhere. And most of that down here at the bottom, this is all from packaging. So let's think about some solutions as we're having this talk. Let's just get rid of the stuff that's easy to get rid of, which is your single-use plastic. And that at least is moving us in the right direction. While we're here, I am a plant physiologist, and this is a garden club. And so I think we need to think about plastic in our gardens and in our farming, really in our farming more than our gardening. But in our farming, there's a lot of plastic now. If you go out into the fields, I haven't seen any in Michigan, I'll be honest with you. You don't have quite as many farms as we do in our area. We got a lot of dairy cow. And with it, we got a lot of corn. And we've got fields and fields of this stuff. Just single-use plastic being used to wrap up hay. Whereas we used to put it in a barn, but we don't put it in a barn anymore. It's cheaper to do it this way. We just wrap it up and leave it out in the field. And I've talked to farmers about this. I'm like, you know, guys, what are you doing with this stuff? Well, it's dirty. We can't do anything with it. We just throw it away. Great. Wonderful. It should be more expensive and you wouldn't just throw it away, right? We also lay it down in order to dampen the number of weeds that we have or to warm the soil. Both of those processes work by putting down a film, a plastic film, which if you read the packaging on the plastic film, you're supposed to take that plastic film up after a couple of years or every year, actually. How many people actually do that is a debatable point. How many farmers do it? Probably not very many. And so therefore it just sits there in the field and it degrades over time and the field becomes full of plastic particles. Seeds are coated with plastic now. In that plastic coating, they often have a time release herbicide that will also will release over time. But that herbicide has got to be coated in something in order for it to be a time release. That's plastic being in use. And then of course, plastic in order to make the soil warmer and allow plants to grow without weeds. Just an example. I'm sure you can all think of other places that plastic is used in farming, but just get the juices flowing on this. And what happens to plastic? It breaks down, but it doesn't go away. It just breaks down to smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. And if you think about it, remember that picture of all that plastic going into landfills, and each one of those water bottles, it takes about 30 years for a water bottle to break down. And the truth of the matter is the water bottle itself on its own is big enough that it is an eyesore to us all. And yeah, if we had lots and lots of water bottles, we're just piling up water bottles in this room, if you can imagine. But as it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, we actually have more and more and more particles of plastic. And if it takes 30 years, what we've got today, in 30 years from now, we will have a massive amount of more plastic. So we need to stop producing it now and get rid of what we have, right? See, I told you weren't going to like me by the end of this. And what happens to that plastic in the soil? Well, it gets moved around. Okay, it sits in the soil. Obviously, water comes along, that can move it along. Wind, if it's sitting on the surface of the soil, that can move it as well. You know, those things can move it. But we don't really think about the organisms that, because plastic particles have, they're sticky and things stick to them and they stick to things like earthworms. And you know, you think about earthworms, they're so good for our soil, right? They go through the soil, they move it around. Well, studies have shown that when earthworms come in contact with plastic particles, then you get a layer of plastic at certain layers under the soil because the earthworms are there. So it's like they're moving it for us, not necessarily where we want it to be moved. Another example is here. This is on the body of an insect from the Adirondacks. I think he must have gone through a pile of plastic, but it doesn't really matter. You can see it's sticky, and you can imagine all insects moving this stuff around. And then finally, unfortunately, we also are getting more and more evidence now that plastic, nanoplastics, very, very, very small particles of plastic are being taken up by plants, and they get into the vascular tissue of plants. That we'll talk about in a second. So this is an example of that, where you have microplastics, which are small particles that you can still see. And those actually probably can't get into the plant very well, but they stick to the outside. They get to the fine root system, they stick to the outside, and they cause problems there as well, because there are foreign objects there, and they're sticky, and things stick to them, and all sorts of things happen at that point. But the nanoplastics, the even smaller pieces, actually get taken up by the plant. And we have evidence that they are pulled up through the plant to the leaves of the plant. And then you can start thinking about what happens when they get to the leaves of a plant. And at the same time, these particles are so small that they're also in the air all around us. We breathe them in. We're breathing them in right now, whether you like it or not. And plants breathe them in as well. And they're breathing them in through the stomata. And we know that through the stomata, they are moving in, getting into the plant, getting into the vascular tissue, being moved through the vascular tissue. And they're also going to the trichomes, the hairy parts of the outside of the plant. So if you're an animal and you're coming along and you're eating the plant, you're going to be eating particles of plastic. In humans, these particles are also getting into us. And we're breathing them in, so they're getting into our lungs. The larger pieces, the microplastics, are probably actually being exited out through pooping and peeing, because we recognize them as foreign bodies. So that's a good thing. But unfortunately, the smaller nanoplastic particles, our bodies don't recognize as foreign objects. And they can be so small that they get into our heart through our blood, and they get into our lungs, they get into our brain, they cross over our blood-brain barrier. And once they get into these places, they cause problems. Some of the problems that they cause are inflammation. That's a big one, because it's a foreign body, especially in like the brain or in the heart or in the arteries, and that leads to problems there. So, excuse me. So what is this stuff? I mean, that's a reasonable question. What actually is plastic? What is this thing that we're taking in? And actually, it's a pretty simple concept. Did anyone take organic chemistry at one point in your life? Organic chemistry? Yeah. So these are chains, hydrocarbon chains. Basically, carbon to another carbon to another carbon. They're making long chains of carbon, and each carbon usually has a hydrogen attached to it. But these are long, long chains of them, and they're close together, very, very close together to make plastic. And then, unfortunately, They shove chemicals in between those those carbon chains in order to give plastic the characteristics that we all think of. The flexibility, the ability to not stain, to not break down in the sun. All of those types of characteristics don't come naturally with a carbon chain. They only come by adding chemicals between these carbon chains. And they're not bound. Like if you remember your chemistry, you have a carbon and you bind a hydrogen to it, and those two are bound together. These guys are not bound. They're just chains with these molecules of chemicals stuck in between them. So chemicals can add up to 50% of the weight of plastic. So we can't really call plastic just hydrocarbons. We have to realize that their plastic is hydrocarbons plus all of these chemicals. And these chemicals are unfortunately a problem. Some of you probably have heard of some of these chemicals like BPA. Remember the BPA bottles? You don't want to drink from them. And so BPA was banned. Believe it or not, it's really only banned in baby bottles. All the other bottles, you can buy BPA in those bottles. But also, you know, everybody's out there to make money. So they just substituted the BPA for BPS or BPSH or BPAH, or there's a lot of them. They all have the same characteristic of making that hard bottle, which we all wanted, but unfortunately they also have the same chemical properties, which is a problem. And we'll add to that things like PFAS, forever chemicals, phthalates, flame retardants. I see some people nodding their head like, yeah, right. Well, all of those chemicals are put into the plastic to give it the characteristics that we so much want in our plastic. In fact, we know that there are over 16,000 additives to plastic. And the problem we have here, especially here in the United States, is we're not regulating them. And the reason for that here is because we have a system in this country where we regulate a chemical after we know it causes a problem. We don't regulate it beforehand, knowing that there might be a problem, right? We only regulate it after it has been proven to cause a specific problem. And the problem we have with these chemicals especially is the problems don't occur for 20 years. And so it's very difficult to say, oh, it's because of that chemical that you were exposed to 20 years ago is causing the cancer that you see there. And everybody just says, you prove it. And we can't do that. And so therefore, the chemical industry has been allowed to produce tons and tons of chemicals and add them to our plastics. Now, the few that we have gotten regulated were the big ones, some of the big ones, and the chemical industry has usually pulled back and substituted a new chemical for whatever finally, after lawsuits, etc., they have decided, or our society has decided, needs to be regulated. Now, we could do this differently. We could regulate classes of chemicals, because even though we regulate one chemical, you can make a substitute that is very similar with the same characteristics, but has the same toxic problems. But that one isn't regulated in our system. So we could change our system to regulate classes of chemicals, and that would be a big help for starters. Europe is beginning to do that. We are not. Maybe one of these days. But as you can see, we know 24% of the chemicals that we do know about are hazardous. They are neurotoxins, carcinogens, mutagens, endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors are hormones, or they act like hormones in our body. Our body doesn't understand that they aren't hormones. And so they kind of mimic hormones. That causes some real problems for us. But unfortunately, also, we don't have data on a lot of them because it's proprietary information. Right. So when we that plastic breaks down into smaller pieces, we now can imagine those chemicals leaching out into the environment. So this image shows you some of the things. You can follow the arrows and see the products which end up in the environment. And especially things that you see with rings like that, those don't break down well in our environment. That's called a benzene ring and is very, very difficult to for nature, for insects, for bacteria, for fungi to break those guys down. So they stay in our environment for a long period of time. And then that debris that we were talking about, I said was sticky, right? So anything in the soil can stick to it, like heavy metals, like copper, lead, things like that. DDT, there's still, believe it or not, there's DDT in our soil still from when it was used, and we stopped using it decades ago, but it's still sitting there, and it can be taken up. So then, you all have a great imagination. I'm sure you can imagine something that gets sticky with a little piece of lead on it or something. It gets up into the atmosphere, then you breathe it in, and you don't need to drink the lead anymore. You can get it that way, right? Thankfully, this isn't happening all over the place yet, but well, it is happening, but not to an extent that we're all falling down dead at the moment. I would go back to my grandchildren though. And some of you, I'm sure, have heard of forever chemicals. Yeah. Well, PFAS is a class of forever chemicals. And these guys are part of those chemicals that we're talking about with plastic. And the difference with PFAS, with these forever chemicals and why they're called forever chemicals, is because remember I told you that with plastic, carbon, hydrogen chain, right? That, you've got carbon, you've got each one of those carbons has hydrogens around it. But with these forever chemicals, they don't have hydrogen attached to them. They have fluorine. And so it's a carbon atom with fluorine attached to it. And that is a much, much, much stronger bond that is not found in nature. And so therefore, nature can't break it down. Hence the term forever chemical. And we have to kind of think about some of this. Why, when we have single-use plastic, are we putting in a chemical that doesn't break down, right? We have a product that we don't want to use for very long, and yet we're adding a chemical to it that lasts forever. You got to wonder about this, right? And unfortunately, you've heard of the nitrogen cycle. We have a PFAS cycle. And this stuff, because it doesn't break down, is just being recycled and recycled and recycled in our environment. And that means it's also building up in our environment. And it's building up in us. And that's, unfortunately, we know that. It is in every single person's blood in the world at this point. And there might be, it's in like 99.9% of every person's blood in this world. So this isn't just an American problem. This is a worldwide problem. And this is kind of the cycle. You know, it's produced and it's in everything. PFAS, for instance, is in absolutely everything. It's in your shampoo, it's in your toothpaste, it's in your deodorant, it's in your clothes, it's in everything. And it sheds out of those things, ends up in our wastewater system. We don't take it out. So your wastewater ends up, it gets treated obviously to make sure it doesn't have any bacteria or anything like that, but then it gets put back into the water system and eventually gets taken back up. Well, if we're not taking that PFAS out, then it's just going through the system. And it gets taken up by plants. I think you got the picture. I don't need to kill a dead horse here. All right. You guys not liking me yet? All right, let's see, why is this not working? There we go. And we were talking about those chemicals, which are endocrine disruptors. I do need to mention them. You know, hormones work in your body at extremely low levels. They're made in one part of your body, and they're transported through your blood, and they're used in a different part of your body. Unfortunately, if we have a endocrine disruptor in there, that same thing happens. It goes through your blood and it ends up in your body doing something, maybe blocking the hormone that should be activating in your body. And they work at extremely low levels. So if we are taking these chemicals in, they are affecting our bodies, even though it's extremely small amounts. And that's kind of a problem. Now, I mention these because these are much more of a problem for young people. When people are growing, when they are still developing, and that is in a fetus state as well, these chemicals can really, really impact how the body forms and what happens. So, a real problem. You know, the timing kind of makes the poison here. It's the kids. And we still don't have this idea in our head yet. Kids are playing with toys. Those toys are made of plastic. Now, if you're wealthy, you can get toys made of different products like wood or not vinyl, silicone, or something like that. These are expensive. These are expensive though. And the vast majority of people can't afford those things. And so they are left with having to buy toys and other things like bottles for storing milk and things like that for a baby. They're forced into this. And this is not what we think of our society is doing. Okay? So we need to change this.
But Kim, they don't even know it.
They don't even know it. That is correct. That is absolutely correct. So what does it all mean? Well, you know, we're just kind of running a biological experiment. We don't have any controls, and we can't have any controls because we're all infected. And besides that, I'm a scientist. We don't do studies like that on humans on purpose, right? You know, we're going to give you plastic over here. We can't do that. So we're just running a biological experiment and we have no controls. So what do we do? You know, yeah, I have got you depressed enough now. Yeah, you can run That might be the first, like, I want to put my head down. I don't want to think about it anymore. I am done. And I wouldn't blame anyone. And in fact, when I give these talks to young people, you all are older, so I can tell you some things that I wouldn't tell young people. I backpedal some of this because I don't need somebody who is a mom who is breastfeeding to know that her milk has more chemicals in it because her body expels those chemicals. It's not just peeing and pooping in women. I don't tell them that. But you can also think about it as kind of, let's lift this fog, this light that we have. You know, for so much of our lifetime, we've been here, not knowing that there was anything out there that was a problem. You didn't even know really that there was a mountain behind you here. Well, it's really a hill, but that's right. But now it's starting to get a little bit clearer. And what we need to do is get past this point, and we need to get to a picture clear image. And only then are we going to start seeing a change to our regulations, to our laws, to the way we think about these things. And that takes all of us together. So, plastics, you know, what are they made from? They're made from fossil fuels, guys. You know, oil and gas. Actually, most of it is now coming from fracked gas, from ethane. And interestingly enough, ethane used to be just burned. You know, it was the byproduct of fracking. But we realized that why just burn it? We can use it to make plastic. So most of our plastic is now made from ethane, from oil and gas industry. So, you know, the oil and gas industry, their plan A was to use oil and gas to produce energy in the form of oil and heat, right? And that has worked really well for a long time. And now, as we're realizing that we're destroying our planet by burning this stuff, we're realizing they are seeing the end of using oil and gas for that purpose, for combustion. And instead, they are beginning to see that oil and gas should be used to produce a new product, plastic. And what better product than one that's a little bit like gasoline? You know, when you buy gasoline, you have to go to the gas station, you fill up your tank, you drive 300 miles, and you come back and you do it again, right? Well, even better with single-use plastic. You buy it, you use it once, and you buy it again. It's even better than gasoline, and it's a lot faster, and it maybe is more profitable. And the global plastic production, not surprisingly, is increasing tremendously. And we are no exception here in the United States. We actually are one of the biggest plastic producers in the world. China's got us beat. China definitely has us beat, but we're right up there with about almost 19%, or probably now it's 20% of global production. And just to give you an image here, this is Shell Chemical. This is a plant in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's right outside Pittsburgh. It went online in November of 2022. And now I had to drive over to Pittsburgh to look at this place because I was so fascinated. It really is big. You can see those are train engines down there, and they look like toy things. It is huge, and it is emitting a ton of carbon every year, and volatile organic compounds. That's from all those chemicals, and burning this stuff. I must admit, my jaw dropped just the other day when I realized this thing only came online in November of 2022. They've had numerous lawsuits because the plastic that they produced is these little things called nurdles. They're just little beads of plastic that then get melted together to make products. And nurdles are like sand. And they, as you move them from one bin to another bin, they fall all over the place and they end up in the waters near them. And there are river keepers there that are out watching for them, and they're suing them out up the wahoozy as much as they can. I'll be honest. I was amazed to find out they're going to sell this thing. The whole idea was that, this is great for the community. It's just going to provide so many jobs and do everything. Well, they took 10 years to build it. They got it up and running, and they're now looking for a buyer because they don't want to be in this business. And that was of July of 2025. And it might take them a little while, but they built it because Pennsylvania gave them a $1.6 billion tax credit. Yeah, you're laughing. Like, it's amazing, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, plastic is releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It takes energy to produce this stuff. And in order to produce it, we are producing a lot of carbon dioxide in the process. Just add to the list of things that are wrong with this, right? So it's probably time for a deep breath, Think about your environment. This is near where I live. Imagine going out for a walk or at Mackinac Island, taking a bike ride around, something like that. Just breathe, relax. This is a lot, I'm aware, and I'm sorry. I would like to make it less. Maybe one of these days I'll be able to do that. All right. But we really need to talk about a little other part of this story. And that is who's responsible. We're all old enough to remember the Indian. Remember that ad? Yeah, the Indian comes up on his canoe, he gets out of the boat, and he's standing there with his paddle, and a car comes driving up, and you see a hand throwing a Burger King bag out the car window at his feet, and a little tear comes down, and it says, "Only you can keep America beautiful." Remember that? Forever we had that, right? This was like in 73 or something. Well, just think about that for a second. All of a sudden, the emphasis on who's got to clean up this stuff and whose fault this is us. It's our fault. Only we can do anything about this. It's not the company, it's not the industry, it's us. It worked really, 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 really well. At the same time, they had a competition to make a little sign. That was the Chasing Arrows that won. That was the design that won. It does not mean it's recyclable. Okay, that myth by now, please, let's break the myth. It does not mean that at all. It simply means the number that is inside there just tells you what kind of plastic it is, like a 1, a 2. It's either a high density plastic or a low density plastic or whatever. And the reason you can't recycle the 5s, the 6s, the 7s is because those are a combination of multiple different types of plastic together. And if you tried to put them together, you would make soup, right? We cannot recycle our way out of this mess. And if there's something you can walk away with, remove that sense of guilt that you didn't recycle that water bottle. okay? That is looking at the small picture, not the big picture. The big picture is we didn't ask for all this plastic, just like in the grocery store, ever since COVID, we didn't ask for all this plastic. Industries are producing this plastic, and they're doing it because it makes them money. And if somebody is really going to be talking about plastic, they should be talking about preventing plastic, reducing the amount of plastic we have, reusing what we possibly can, recycling down there towards the bottom, and then recovering and disposing of the bottom. Instead, the conversation in this country is, how do we recycle it? Right? And how do we use recycled plastic? Remember, we get back to that story of where does plastic actually come from? It is a lot cheaper to make virgin plastic than it is to clean up plastic. So there are the industry definitely likes to say that we can recycle this plastic and use it. But that's a bit of a myth. It's a pretty much of a false solution. And when you hear about a company saying, we use 70% recycled material, right? There's a little game that we can play with chemistry. And that game is associated with the numbering system. So if you imagine that you have a huge vat of plastic, maybe a ton of the stuff, and don't quote me on numbers because they'll be wrong. Let's say you have a ton of this stuff. But you need to have that plastic be really clean and only have one type of plastic in it with one little chemical in it to give it the characteristic that you're looking for. So you can't just take a whole bunch of plastic and shove it together, melt it all down, and make it into something that you wanted. Because if you took organic chemistry, remember how hard it was to separate caffeine out of coffee? It took the entire semester to get just a tiny bit. Imagine 18,000 chemicals in there, right? Because if you put it all together, that isn't going to work. So instead, that big vat, most of it is used to heat up, make the energy, because plastic burns really well and it burns really hot because it's an oil basically, right? You burn it, and then that energy, right, is used to melt your clean plastic, your ones, your twos, which by the way are just about the only ones that are clean enough to be used. Your ones, let's say, and then you've got a little tiny bit of that one, and you add virgin plastic to your little tiny bit of one that was clean. And now you look at the whole picture of how much plastic you have, right? And you say, well, we had a ton over here, and we added 6 ounces over here, and we used recycled material that was 1 ounce. So altogether, we have recycled plastic, of which 70% of it was recycled material. All we did with that part was burn it. Really, the plastic that you've got in your hand is virgin plastic. So really, all we're doing is burning the plastic to produce the heat that we need to melt that little tiny bit of plastic and add some virgin plastic to it. So when you hear companies, and I'll be honest, you guys have a plastic company right down the road, Petoskey, thank you, Petoskey Plastic, and they tout that they used recycled plastic for everything. I don't know. I can simply tell you what the industry in general is doing. I don't know what they are doing. So maybe they are doing something different. But the industry in general is doing it the way I just described. So that's a bit of a problem. And these other false solutions that we have, chemical recycling, that's just burning it, incineration, waste to energy, all of that is just burning it. And when we burn that stuff, we're releasing carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, and chemicals are going up into the atmosphere as well. So really, the solution to this thing is to stop plastic pollution, is stop making plastic. Now, we can't stop making plastic. We need plastic. Plastic is really, really important. The chair you're sitting on would fall apart if you wasn't plastic in there, right? But we don't need single-use plastic. Let's start with stuff that we can bite off, chew, and get rid of. And single-use plastic is that thing. There are solutions to every single use. There've got to be. We are a very innovative country. Let's use our innovation. So here's just an example. Maybe you've heard of the circular economy model. Right now we have a linear system. You make something, you use it, you throw it away, and we forget about it. Let's rethink the way we do things and think about it as a circular economy. This is just one example. This is Cadia, small business. It's a startup, I believe. But they basically have this kiosk that they put in a warehouse. And instead of people having their water bottles, you have a water bottle machine, plastic bottle machine, etc. They have this kiosk there where people can come and they get a reusable metal container. They choose what, it'll be sparkling water in there, and then they'll choose a juice to add to it, basically. And then when you finish your drink, you just put the bottle back in the kiosk, and back there somewhere, there's a little robot of some sort that cleans it, sterilizes it, and gets it ready for the next person. Pretty cool idea. And it is low impact to the environment because you don't need to bring all those cases of bottles, like those trucks of bottles and cans and everything else. You don't have to bring any of those. And you're using a concentrated mix for your drink. So and everything stays there. So the only thing you're bringing in after you get the original stuff in there is your concentrated mix for your different types of drinks. That's the kind of idea that we need to think about. Doesn't it sound really nice? Doesn't it sound like we can move into the future? Because that's what we need to do. How do we do it? Well, this is the activism part, guys, okay? You're feeling down and out at this point. So now I'm going to say to you, now is the time that we have to join forces. Because, unfortunately, we have poked the bear over the last 5 years or so. And by that, I mean the oil and gas industry knows about us. And not just us, but people in general are becoming more and more concerned about plastic. They can't control the media completely. And because of that, they are getting a little upset. And so you're seeing things like, oh, our plastic is recyclable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they have a lot more money than we do, let's be honest. So the answer is, so we don't lose that collective knowledge, which we are building right now, which in the past, look, we have known a lot of this material 20 years ago. We knew as a society about a lot of this, but it got hidden again and we forgot. And we knew 20 years before that too, and it got hidden. This time we know more, and more people know more, and we can't let it get hidden. So we need to join forces organizations need to work together. It doesn't actually take that many of us to make a change, but we have to spread it out. I'm a biologist. I think about diversity. Diversity is strength. And we have to do things that people may not like. We have to go and lobby ourselves, right? We need to get laws passed. We need to get regulations passed. This is an example of a package reduction recycling bill. This is the idea that we would develop laws that would influence packaging producers to encourage them to make make packaging without these toxins in it, with more paper in them, with the ability to have monies put aside for refill and recycling refill and reuse centers, changing the way we think about our way of using our goods, right? And going from that linear process to a circular process. We can do this. In your community, right here, you could have a movie. Very simple. Host a screening. We're all plastic people now. I'm sure this library would love to do something like that. Organize a letter writing campaign to your legislators, letting them know that you support this bill or that you want a bill. Teach students about plastic pollution. Kids need to know this, and they don't know it right now. You yourself can also learn more. Judith Inc., she was the administrative director for EPA Region 2, and she is a dynamo. Okay, Beyond Plastics is in Bennington College. That is where it's housed, and that's because she is all about the science. Okay, normally I would have a whole bunch of handouts for you, but I did fly and I couldn't bring them. But what I told Dorothy I would do is I will make up a folder that you can access, everybody can access, with flyers with all sorts of information in it. And then those you can print out whatever you want. You can just distribute them in your communities. They are fact sheets. They're designed to be used. You can also take a training, advocacy training. You can start a local Beyond Plastic organization right here in your own community. I took that slide out, but they are scattered all over the country. So you could have one here. And once you have your own group here, you will get tons of information from Beyond Plastics in what you can do. Easy stuff, not difficult. You can join them. Mailing list, that kind of stuff. And that's about it. So, yeah, sure, I'm all up for questions.
Pharmaceutical companies using capsules
Mm-hmm.
they take every day.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you're swallowing plastic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yep, they're in there.
What kind of plastic is that?
I don't know, but it's designed so that the pill will actually get through your system and dissolve in the right place, basically. Yeah.
What can you tell us about plant-based plastics?
Plant-based plastics. Thank you for asking that question. So I told you that the chain of carbons is the backbone for the plastic, right? It's long chains of these carbon-carbon chains. Where those carbon-carbon chains come from is related to the bioplastics. So if they come from the oil and gas industry directly, then they are just what we call plastic. But if they come from the fibers of a plant, for instance, corn or soy or something else of that nature, or willow or whatever you want, then they would be called a bioplastic. But it doesn't matter. Slightly better that it's not coming from oil and gas, absolutely. But the same chemicals have to be put between those columns in order to give plastic the characteristics that you're looking for. So it doesn't matter. And you all know a tree, when it falls to the ground, right? How long does it take to decompose? Years. And that's because it is made of chains of carbon, basically. So that is the same stuff that we were talking about. Those chains of carbon that make that tree stand up taller, the same chains of carbon that go into making plastic. So, does that answer your question? Other questions?
I saw a date of 1966. When did we actually see the first plastic bags and the first plastic containers? And
I don't think I know the answer to that, but it was back in the 50s. That much I know, because it started with Bakelite, at least in the home. It started with Bakelite plastic, and there is a big campaign for women, for women who were toiling away at doing things in their home. And the ads which came out were, you don't need to clean all that stuff, just use plastic plates and throw them away. And we did. We started that. And then there's also Teflon. So Teflon is also a product that is made from PFAS. And that Teflon came out, it was actually used in World War II to line many of the pieces of equipment that required, if they were making like a bomb or something, they had to have a special chemical avoid corrosion and things like that. So Teflon was actually born out of a use of a carbon fluorine bonded chemical that was formed literally to help us win World War II. And then it was applied to commercial use. And that was 3M and DuPont. And Scotchgard. Remember Scotchgard? Yeah, where you would spray that stuff on your fabric, right? But it's also, unfortunately, in things like your hairspray and you name it, it's everywhere. But yeah, does that answer some of your question? As to when the first plastic bag, I don't know when that was. I really don't know. Probably in the 50s would be my guess, but I don't know. Yeah.
So while we're fighting the industry and government big battle, there are more practical things to do at home. Like we've gotten rid of our Tupperware and replaced it with glass containers and things like that. Utensils. What about, one thing I had a question about, so that's a general question. There's one specific question, like what I use more than anything else is water bottles. And you showed the companies using metal. Isn't glass better, or is it
Glass would be better. Obviously, that particular company was using metal. Yeah, I have metal. Yeah, I have metal. Glass is fine. It does tend to break. That's part of the problem. So metal is reasonable. Now, if you want to know just a little tidbit, as a scientist, And if any of you like to do science experiments, soup cans from the 1950s, Campbell soup cans, they've been putting a metal liner in there ever since they started making soup cans. Plastic, I mean, a plastic liner in the metal thing. And it's still there today. It takes the metal taste away. But
Improve shelf life too.
yeah, probably improve shelf life. And your plastic wrap, you asked for a solution, right? I wouldn't, there are a number of things that I would definitely not do. One of them is do not microwave plastic at all. Don't do it. In fact, I wouldn't even recommend you put plastic things in your dishwasher because that breaks it down and the chemicals get released into your water system. So it's probably better for you not to do that either. Wash them by hand, it's much better. The other thing is plastic wrap. I don't recommend that you use any more plastic wrap than you have to. And the reason for that is plastic wrap is put over things and it has a lining on it of PFAS. And that lining is in there, it's very thin, and it's in there to make sure that bacteria doesn't go through the plastic and keep the moisture inside or outside, depending on what you're looking for. But we have learned over the last 5, 6, maybe 10 years that PFAS breaks down and actually comes out of the plastic into food. And it specifically likes fatty food. So, like, don't wrap your cheese up in plastic. Especially, don't buy single pieces of cheese. Like, if you do have grandchildren or kids who have kids, etc., and you see them buying single sheets of cheese, that stuff that they put on sandwiches, try to figure out a way not to have that happen. Because that piece of cheese, you think about the surface area of it, you are covering that entire piece of cheese in plastic. It's not even like a whole block of cheese, it's each individual piece. So there's more opportunity for PFAS to get into that cheese that you then eat. And also, don't drink out of a water bottle that has been sitting out in the sun. Don't do that. And the problem with water bottles is we don't know where they come from. Even though you buy them in the grocery store and it's nice and cold, you have no idea how that bottle got to you, for starters, right? It could have been on a truck that's gone across the country at 100 degrees inside that truck. So that bottle has actually been sitting out in the sun, right? And the other issue is we don't regulate the damn water that's put into the bottle. So you have no idea. It says it's clean water. Your tap water is probably a hell of a lot better. We do a better job of controlling your tap water than you do. Maybe. Or you can get filters. I mean, there are filters that you can get that go either under your sink or something like that that will take your PFAS anyway out. Activated charcoal works okay. It's not great. They're better ones. I'm not going to list any brands or anything. If you're really feeling paranoid, at least about PFAS, there are now companies that you can send your water away and find out if you have at least 50 of them or so, different types of PFAS in your water. You can do that or not, right? Oh yeah, but labs, I did find a place that did 55 and I just wanted to try it. So I sent my water away. I didn't have any. I was surprised. Well, I was pleased. We'll put it that way. I was pleased.
PFAS test is about $100.
Yeah. I think I got 70, but yeah, essentially it'll cost about 100. I mean, In my world of worlds, that would be free for everybody, right? But we're not in that world. Yeah.
Are there coatings on things like parchment paper, which you could create cheese, or is that contaminated too, and not really just paper?
Parchment paper is a product that is made by it is coated. Sorry. It is coated, which is why it works as parchment paper. And things slide off of it. It's because it has the characteristics that we're all looking for. And wax paper is not made of wax anymore. So, unfortunately. So it is hard. It is hard, but there are things that you can wrap your stuff in. There's beeswax. I have cloth containers to put my vegetables in. So I bring them home, take them out of any kind of plastic and put them in that. I store things in glass jars, but it is a concerted effort. You're right. You're absolutely correct. You can limit, and some of the stuff I can send to everybody is some suggestions on how you can limit it, but you can't eliminate your exposure. Yeah.
Compostable garbage bags and
So compostable garbage bags, again, better than not having compostable garbage bags, but two things. One, most of the time they can't be composted in your own backyard. They have to be composted at a commercial site. I've tried to compost them in my I've got an electric composter. I'm really lazy. They don't compost. That's one. But the other problem is they still have the chemicals in them. And those chemicals leach out. Even if you do buy the ones that you can actually compost in your own backyard, those chemicals leach out. You really want them in your soil. All right, there you go. So that's the problem. Yeah.
We just touch on electric cars.
What would you like me to tell you about electric car? I have one. I have a 2018 Bolt, which up until the day before I left here never gave me a single ounce of trouble. As in 108,000 miles, never needed an oil change, never needed anything. I think I've gotten the air filter changed, but that's about it. Oh, and the latch on the front of my bonnet broke, but that's it since 2018 until the day before I was going to come here. And now we're waiting to hear how expensive that's going to be to fix. But electric cars are marvelous. Mine has plastic in it. There's no doubt about that. I have a metal sign that I put on it. One of the things that Dorothy didn't mention is I'm also president of our local League of Women Voters organization. And so I have a big vote sign on the side that's supposed to go on the side of my car. But there's so much plastic in my car, it doesn't stick. So I have to drive my husband's car around that will allow it to stick. And I can drive around with that. But yeah, electric cars are marvelous. They have less parts to them. They don't break down as much. They're quiet. They don't release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And you don't have to go to the gas station to fill it up with that smelly oil, or gasoline rather.
How do you dispose of the batteries?
How do you dispose of the batteries? Well, I haven't actually gotten to that problem yet. And I would assume that if I need to dispose of the battery before I actually sell the car, which is highly unlikely, I would call up my car company and say, how do I dispose of this? And my guess is that they would take them back, but that's all I know. I have not had to replace my battery. My battery has been replaced for me, but I have not had to replace it. No.
I understand the car batteries are 98% recyclable.
Well, there you go.
You can do
Excellent. All right, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, there's a whole industry of, for recycling, presumably lithium ion batteries at scale. I don't know that it's achieved scale yet, but the business opportunity is huge.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I'm not sure you emphasized that the extended producer legislation would sunset making single-use plastics over a period of time.
Oh, that is a very good point. Actually, New York State is trying to get a extended producer responsibility bill passed, and it would reduce the amount of plastic in our packaging by 70% over a 12-year period. So that would be the idea. And just the threat of doing that has actually encouraged companies to change their packaging. And we need more of that threat. What other questions? So are you guys ready to be activists and to inform others about all of the problems about plastic? Yeah.
One other thing, I mean, I apologize to the audience, but I get to talk to this.
This is my husband, by the way.
Not for talking to her, but for knowing some, one or two things that we talked about that she hasn't mentioned. There are efforts at the UN level for a world plastics treaty.
Oh, I should mention that, yes. So we are not alone here, okay? It may feel like we're in a sea that is alone, but the UN is actually trying to get a world plastic treaty passed. Because as much as plastic is a problem here, we actually have landfills. And our landfills now work fairly well. They're all lined and, you know, stuff stays in them in general. But in other countries where we used to be shipping all of our garbage, and they've decided that they don't really want our garbage anymore. But in those countries, they didn't have landfills. They don't have any place to store this stuff. And it's breaking down there as much as it is here. So countries all over the world want to have a plastic treaty so that this plastic is reduced. Now, unfortunately, there are a few bad actors at the table, and they've stalled, and it's safe to say that the negotiators have gone home for the year. And those countries are Russia, China, and the United States.
Saudi Arabia.
And Saudi Arabia. So again, this is where our voice can be heard, because it is our country and we can make a difference in our country. All right, anything else? All right, thank you all.
So I want to thank the library for collaborating with our Charlevoix Evening Garden Club to bring Kim in from New York. And if anybody wants to leave me their email address, I will write that down. So when she sends me that folder, I can send it to you. That's the best way I can think to do that. So thank you for coming tonight. I'm really pleased about how many came. Thank you.
Hey, Dorothy. You're gonna send it to club members? Okay, so we don't need to.
No, I meant to mention this, and this is a book